Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're checking out a Magicka Necromancer PVP build. This is updated for the Scalebreaker DLC. And I'm calling this build the Infernal because we have very strong fire damage. That's right, a fire damage Necromancer. Beyond that, we have very good survivability and healing. And all in all, just a very fun and effective build to play in PvP. And it's one of the classes that I think is actually going to get stronger in the Dragonhold DLC. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the future changes to the build. And as usual, we'll go over the stats, the sets, the skills, champion points, and more coming up next. All right, here we are on the Magicka Necro PVP build, just hanging out with my buddy, the Khajiit skeleton here. This is actually the reward for the Elsewhere event. Also, the costume that I'm using is another reward from that event. Both pretty cool for a Necro. If you happen to have a Necromancer, definitely check out those rewards. They're pretty good. I have a video about that on my channel. Feel free to check that out as well. But let's dive into the stats with the usual disclaimer that I'm not completely min-maxed on this build yet. I'm still missing a few passives. I don't have my Undaunted maxed out, for example. So these stats can improve, but just consider this like a baseline for the build. Sitting at about 37, almost 38k max Magicka, about 20k health. That'll jump up to about 24k in PvP. And then sitting at a solid 15k max stamina. As far as our recoveries, those do actually go up with our pets active as well as a potion. So sitting at 22, almost 2300 Magicka recovery, 771 stamina recovery. You can actually change some of your glyphs here. You could run an extra stam recovery glyph to lower your Magicka a little bit if you don't need that much and get your stamina recovery closer to 1000. That's one other way you could play the build. Spell damage is at 2350. That's with a spell power potion. Now we do have a Berserker glyph. That's an extra about 600 spell damage. Plus one of our sets is giving us another 600 or so spell damage. So you'll be sitting close to, I want to say like 3700 spell damage. It's pretty solid overall. Spell crit coming in almost 40%. Our resistances are pretty decent for light armor, coming in at about 20,000, both spell and physical resist, and then 2300 crit resist. So we have 64 points into max Magicka. I am using the Atronach Mundus Stone for that bit of extra Magicka recovery. I'm using the purple tri-stat food here. Just gives you the most stats possible, I think, for this type of build. You definitely want that max health and max stamina, and max Magicka is always good. We have Major Ward, Major Resolve passively. We'll talk about that, as well as our crit buff passively. Potions are the spell power potions. Basic spell power, meaning you get the major sorcery buff, which gives you the 20% spell damage, and then the max Magicka. That's basically what we need because we don't have a spell power buff on our class right now. You can run Entropy if you want to get that buff, and then you could just use the basic trash potions. That will work for Scalebreaker, but I believe that is being changed for Dragonhold, so that's just something to keep in mind. These potions are bought with Alliance points, so it's pretty easy to get these if you PvP often enough and you don't have to spend gold. So I do like those. And then last but not least, our race here. Let's talk about kind of the two best options. I am a Breton right now, and I do like that a lot, especially for no CP in Battlegrounds. Breton is going to be a very nice choice because you have the max Magicka, you have some extra recovery, you have extra spell resistance, which is always good, and then you have the reduced cost. So this helps you really sustain your build, especially if you're not using champion points. Breton passives are awesome. Now the one downside with Breton is you don't have any stamina recovery. This is actually kind of where a High Elf plays a little bit better in PvP because you have that spell recharge passive, which gives you either stamina or Magicka, whichever pool is lowest. So High Elf is also very good for Magicka PvP builds because of that reason. Now you can make up for this, like I talked about earlier. Just run like one stamina recovery glyph on your jewelry and you should be good. So again, Breton, High Elf would be your two best choices in my opinion. So let's jump into the gear sets next. And I did mention that this is a fire-based build. I found that a lot of the Necromancer abilities focus on fire damage, so I wanted to get some sets that really kind of improve that aspect of the build. So the first set I went with is the Elemental Succession set. So not only does the Necromancer have very good fire damage, they just have good elemental damage, period. You have ice damage from your ultimate, you have shock damage from your damage over time tethers, but the majority of your damage, whether it's Flaming Skull or your Bomber, is going to be flame damage, and that's where this set is really strong. It gives you 2 max Magicka bonuses, 1 spell damage bonus, so that's already very good. Whenever you deal elemental damage, so either flame, shock, or frost, you get about 550 spell damage to that element for 4 seconds. It can refresh every 4 seconds, so you basically have 100% uptime, and you can have all 3 buffs active at once. So that means once I start doing flame damage, I'm going to proc the flame buff. If I hit him with ice damage, now I procced the ice buff. So overall, it's just giving us a lot of raw spell damage that's going to apply to the majority of our abilities that we're using for damage. You do get this from Maelstrom Arena. You can pick this up on normal or veteran, it doesn't matter. You can run it on jewelry or body. I would recommend just running a mix of that. Whatever pieces you happen to pick up, run those. I wouldn't run the whole Maelstrom Arena to get the staff. You can, obviously, but it's not necessary. You can just run it on body or jewelry. So let me show you what the effect looks like. Let's say that we're just hitting with a light attack. Our light attack is fire damage, right? So we'll go ahead and hit that. And then you can see that red circle kind of appears underneath. That's going to show us that we have 4 seconds of fire damage bonus. Same thing if we happen to apply a lightning attack or ice. So Elemental Succession, definitely a great damage set. It does amazing damage, and you don't even need a trials group to pick this up. You can pick this up solo, like I said, from normal Maelstrom Arena. I think you should definitely pick it up because you can use it on a variety of builds. Second 5-piece set we're going to use to maximize our damage, especially in no CP and Battlegrounds, it's going to be Spinner's Garments. This gives us similar stats on the 2, 3, and 4. We've got 2 max Magicka bonuses, 1 spell damage bonus, and then the nice buff to our spell penetration. So Necromancers already get some passive spell penetration boost. You get that from your Destruction Staff abilities as well, but this just rounds out our damage, makes us hit a lot harder on all of our skills. So I am using this on my weapons just because they're easy to get. Spinner's Flame Staff. On our front bar, I am using the Nirnhoned trait with, you guessed it, a flame damage enchant, just proccing more of that flame damage. This does have a chance of proccing the burning status effect for even more fire damage. I do like Nirnhoned here as a trait because we maximize our spell damage on the build, but other things like Infused would be pretty strong. Precise would be good as well. Whatever you happen to pick up there, you can farm this yourself or you can pick it up on Guild Traders. Like I said, it's just an easy weapon to get, and you should definitely have a few of these for your builds. So I'm using the Inferno Staff front bar, and then just a plain Restoration Staff on the back bar. I don't even have this golded out yet. You can see I'm getting 400 spell damage every 5 seconds. That's because it's infused. The most important thing here is that you get that infused trait, because at gold, I believe that's something like 500 spell damage, and then that even goes up higher with your major sorcery buff. And this is very easily procced with a light attack. So basically all you have to do is just be on your resto bar, tap, and then you get that 500 spell damage. Very, very strong. Make sure you pick that up. And then for our monster helm here, you have some options based on how you like to play. I think it's very flexible on the Necromancer. Now, what I decided to go with here is the Mighty Chuden set. This is one of my personal favorites, and I'll tell you why after we talk about the set here. So it gives you spell resistance and physical resistance, and then the 2-piece actually gives you 2 bonuses. So this is one of the rare helms that gives you an extra bonus. Usually you just have a 1-piece bonus and a 2-piece bonus. This actually gives you an extra health bonus, so I do really like that. Especially for PvP builds, you want that extra little bit of health. Now the extra bonus here is that we also get Major Ward and Major Resolve at all times. That's our physical and spell resistance buff by 50 to 80. Now I know that Necromancers do have their own resistance buff. It's the skeletal armor, which is fine, I guess. I mean, my problem with it is it's so short. It's like less than 20 seconds for that armor buff, so you're constantly recasting it, and it's kind of a waste of a bar slot. In my opinion, this lets me have more flexibility in terms of what skills I like to run. So this is what I like. Now, as far as other options, if you want more ultimate regen and a little bit of stam recovery, it's going to be very strong as well. You can run Blood Spawn. 2 pieces of Blood Spawn will be excellent. Another good option if you run a few extra dot skills is you can run Valken Scoria. Valken gives you that extra dot damage. Do I have it? Yep. So you can run Valken Scoria if you run maybe an extra dot or 2. The way I'm running this is very direct damage focused, so I wouldn't run Valken in this case. And then the third option, which I would say is really good just across the board if you want more damage overall, it's going to be Slime Craw, because Slime Craw gives you extra spell crit and the minor berserk buff, so that's 8% damage increase. So like I said, you have a lot of options. For me right now, just the most flexible thing, the most utility that I found for the build was Mighty Chuden, but like I said, you can switch it out. Totally fine. And as far as the traits, I am all in light right now on this build. Now you can do 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. That's totally fine. But since I don't have my Undaunted passives anyway, just figured I would go all light armor. The build actually feels very tanky just because of this, the extra resistances we have on this. Plus our Necromancer passives are really strong, you guys. Plus we're running a damage shield. So I don't find that it dies that often. If you play it well enough, then you should have no problem staying alive. But like I said, you can run heavy helmet or heavy shoulders, whatever you want here. Impen is going to be your best trait, obviously. I don't have all Impen. So I've got the Elemental Succession chest. I've got Spinner's Waist, Succession gloves, Succession legs, Spinner's shoes, and then just a mix of jewelry here. I've got a Succession neck, Spinner's ring, Succession ring, and my glyphs here are 2 Magicka recovery and 1 spell damage. Like I said, you could run a stamina recovery glyph on one of these, especially if you're a Breton. This will help a lot with stamina sustain in PvP. Now notice also that Succession is interesting because it comes in different traits. I actually have a robust necklace, so I have stamina on my necklace. And I have a healthy ring, so I have health on my ring. And I actually kind of like this because as my Breton Necromancer, I have plenty of max Magicka for PvP. And I kind of thought it was cool that I have an extra stam bonus and an extra health bonus. But that's just how the drops worked out. Kind of random there, and you might get something different. So let's jump over to our skills, starting on the Flame Staff, which is our front bar. We've got Mystic Siphon in the first slot. This is doing pretty solid dot damage in this patch. Now it is a tether, which is a little bit challenging. You have to have a corpse on the ground for that to work. You can see it's not highlighted until a corpse appears, and now I can use that tether. It does dot damage around the target, and then anything that happens to be standing in this line will also get that dot damage, so it is pretty nice. It is shock damage, which is buffed by Elemental Succession. So the damage is pretty good, but mostly we're using it for the Magicka restore here. So a little bit more than 100 Magicka per second, so like a 200 Magicka recovery if you were to look on it on the stat sheet. The passives, though, are also very nice. You've got 3% damage done here on the front bar, which is important. It does add up, especially if you, let's say you run Slime Craw, you can add that to your Minor Berserk. So it is good. And then we actually get passive ultimate generation from this ability as well. Next up is Flame Reach. And in the Scalebreaker DLC, this is a pretty strong dot to run. It fit the theme of the build in my mind, which is totally flame damage, fire damage focused. So I did like it for that. And then it's just going to add some extra pressure. Some extra dot pressure to the build is very nice. We're also usually going to use this first to proc that Elemental Succession, that fire damage buff before we begin our combo. So it's good for that as well. Now Dampen Magic is going to be our front bar damage shield. I do like this now over Harness Magicka. They really nerfed Harness Magicka, in my opinion. The extra Magicka coming in from that is just really not worth it, especially as a Breton. We have good Magicka recovery already. They actually raised the size. They increased the size of the shield, I believe, so it's pretty strong now. It's capped at 60% of your max health, which is not bad at all. So just remember to keep that up, especially before you begin a fight, just to help your survivability a bit there. Now, we've got Ricochet Skull, which is another flame ability here on the Necromancer. Basically, it's your single target spammable damage skill. Does pretty good damage, especially if this happens to crit. The cost is low. It's a good cost here as a spammable. And every third cast, you get 20% increased damage and a bounce effect. It's not bad. And again, it is buffed by fire damage, so it's going to go well with our fire damage theme here. And then just for our last regular skill, we've got Inner Light. For the passive Magicka bonus here, we got Magicka Recovery from Mage Guild passives. You also get the bonus Spell Critical, which is really important. You do want that Spell Critical buff in PvP for sure. For our ultimate here, I went with just a passive ultimate. Now, I'm not going to use this very much, although I do tend to hit it by mistake, unfortunately. But even if you do use this, it's very good, this patch. It gives you a 30k damage shield for 30 seconds, and then a nice heal over time effect after the damage shield breaks. So this is a very strong group ultimate for defensive. So it's great in small group, it's great in no CP and battlegrounds, especially this patch in Scalebreaker currently, where you have a lot of dot damage coming in. This can keep your whole group alive. So it is kind of nice to have, but I am really just using it for the passives, which I don't even have all the passives yet unlocked on this guy. But from your Alliance support passives, you get 10% Magicka recovery just by having this ability slotted. So let's think about it. If you're at 2k Magicka recovery, you're going to get an extra 200 Magicka recovery on your front bar just for having this slotted. So it's really good just for the passive Magicka recovery there. Backbar time, I've got Stalking Blast Bones. This is definitely key, you guys, to the Magicka Necromancer burst. You can think of it almost like a Magicka Warden with their ability, the bugs, because it's a timed burst. So after about 3 seconds, the skeleton will jump to your target. You'll get a nice burst of flame damage, and you combo that with your other flame damage abilities. It is a little bit buggy still, but when it works, you guys, it is awesome. It is AoE burst damage. Then for our heal here, we are on the resto bar, I forgot to mention. So we have our Restoration Staff Heal, Rapid Regeneration, 14k unbuffed heal over 5 seconds. They pretty much buff this skill to be, I would say, almost better than Vigor for stamina characters. How that's been in the past. This is like the Magicka version of Vigor now. It's very strong. In fact, this is just basically the only heal I have. You have this paired up with your damage shield on the front bar, and you'll take very little damage, and then you'll get healed back to full in 5 seconds. So it's very strong. It's so strong I'm not even running a burst heal, honestly, on this build right now. It's that good. You can swap around some skills for a burst heal, but this is just so good, you guys. You got to use it. Now, Angry Totem, I was a little on the fence about running this, because when Necromancer first came out, this ability was bad. It was like garbage. But now I actually really like it. This is one of my favorite abilities. Let me show you what it looks like, actually. So it summons at the ground, creates this circle. Within the circle, you have Minor Protection, which is very good already. And then every 2 seconds, you can see that visual effect. It's doing an AoE Fear. Okay, so you have an AoE Fear around you on the ground, and Minor Protection. It does some low magic damage too. But this skill, you guys, is so good just for area control. I feel almost like a Magicka Templar when I'm using this, because enemies don't like to get in it. They don't like to get around me. So it really forces stamina builds to stay off you, which is great. But then if they are brave enough to come at you, then they get feared for 2 seconds. If you see somebody and you assume like they're gonna come near you, pop this down, have your damage shield up, and as soon as they get to you, they're gonna be feared. And then you can do your combo on them. So it's a really great defensive skill. Like I said, it kind of feels like you're playing Magicka Templar, The way I think of Necromancer, Magicka Necromancer, it's like a cross between Magicka Templar and Magicka Warden as far as the playstyle in PvP, because you have very good area defense here with your totem, and then you have that burst damage like a Magicka Warden would have. So if you've never played a Magicka Necromancer before, that's kind of how I play it. That's how I think of it because of these two skills. It just kind of works out that way. Next up is Hexproof. This is a cleanse effect, actually, and it's very good. It cleanses 4 negative effects. We also get a nice passive bonus here. You can see, while slotted, the cost of all your abilities are reduced by 3%. That's great because this applies to our ultimate and applies to our heal. So that's very good. It does cost health, but it's not a lot of health. So you'll want to combine this, drop your hexproof and then just make sure you have rapid regen up. 1 tick of rapid regen will make up for this, no problem. And then last up is our defensive buff, Spirit Guardian. This thing is amazing. My only gripe about Spirit Guardian is it lasts 16 seconds, so it is kind of short. You have to keep an eye on it. Make sure it's up 100% of the time, you guys, because it's just so good. The heal is not great, though. It heals you every 2 seconds, which is kind of meh. I mean, you can combine it with your rapid regen for some decent heal over time. But while we're using it is this 10% damage reduction. So 10% of any damage that we take is going to be transferred to the Guardian instead of us. This is really good. It's basically like running Buffer of the Swift, if you know that PvP defensive set, but you're just getting it for free by using this one skill. It's really good. The other morph actually is a very good heal, but I just found like the defensives here, especially in no CP and Battlegrounds, this makes the build feel very tanky. I'm in all light armor and I have no trouble staying alive on this build, and it's mostly because of this. Now we also get very good passives, which we'll talk about those in a second. This increases our Magicka and stamina recovery. It's great. You got to use it. And then last up, of course, is the Glacial Colossus. It's about 219 ultimate. Here, that's because we have some cost reduction on the back bar. You know it. You either love it if you're a Necro, or you hate it if you fight against a Necro. You get the 3 smashes. It does big, huge AoE burst damage and the major vulnerability. Now, from what I've seen on the patch notes for Dragonhold, it's gone up and down. I think it's going to be stronger next patch. I think what they're going to end up doing is they'll give the major vulnerability a cooldown, which is not an issue for PvP at all. It doesn't matter for PvP. But I think what they'll do with that is they'll actually increase the duration. We're talking about maybe an 8-second duration now. They're all going to have that major vulnerability for 8 seconds. I mean, think about that. It's already strong in PvP, and I think it's just going to get stronger based on what I've seen. So 9 out of 10 times, this is the ultimate that I will be using. Just be patient with it. Make sure you're using it in the right area. You have to be good with your targeting and your target selection. Make sure those targets aren't paying attention to you, or they're low health or something. And if you're using it well like that, then you're guaranteed just stacks of kills with this ultimate. It's amazing. Let's take a quick look at passives here. Passives are definitely very important on the Necromancer. So you've got reusable parts. This is just a bit of cost reduction. You'll get this on your Blast Bones, which is pretty good. The skill ends up being very cheap with that. Death Knell. This is very good offensive passive. It increases your crit strike chance, basically like a crit strike execute against enemies under 25% health, by 10% for each Gravelord ability slotted. So I have 2 of these on my front bar. I've got Ricochet Skull and Mystic Siphon. You could work in Stalking Blast Bones on your front bar somewhere. I think the only way you would be able to do that is if you switched your damage shield to the back bar, which you definitely could do. And then you'd actually get 30% crit bonus execute damage, which is crazy. So think about that if you are adjusting the build to do more damage. Dismember. When a Gravelord ability is active, you get the extra spell penetration. We talked about that. So that's going to be anytime you have your Stalking Blast Bones or the Tether active, you're going to get that extra spell penetration, which doesn't sound like much, but that's just more raw damage. It's really good to have that. So make sure you're casting that Blast Bones as much as possible. Rapid Rot, we get some extra dot pressure from both our Siphon and our Flame Reach, And as far as I have seen, this is actually getting buffed for Dragonhold. I think it might be 15% next patch, which means in the eyes of ZeniMax, Necromancers aren't as strong as like a Dragon Knight for dots, but they might be like the best general dot class in the game, because this affects all dots, not just class dots, but every dot in the game. So this is cool, and it's going to get better next patch. Bone Tyrant. This gives you some sustain, actually. I forgot to mention this. So you do get passive sustain on the Necro, which is really good. 200 Magicka and Stamina when an enemy dies, which is awesome. Disdain Harm, you get some damage reduction from dot abilities while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. So for us, that would be just our Fear Totem on this build, but if you're running the armor, you'll get that even more. Health Avarice, Health Recovery, we're not really worried about that. This passive, though, this passive, you guys, 1250 max health for doing nothing. For being a Necromancer, you get 1250 max health. This is great for PvP. More health, always good. So Living Death, when you have a negative effect on you, healing done is increased by 8%. So keep that in mind. Yes, we are running a cleanse. The cleanse is really good for if you have like 3 or 4 dots stacked on you, then I would definitely use Hexproof. But if you just have like 1 dot, I wouldn't cleanse it necessarily, because your healing is going to be boosted anyways while you have that negative effect on you. So that's just something to remember as a Necro. We also get increased critical chance to healing abilities. So like our Rapid Regen right on the back bar, based on our health. So that's good as well. Talked about this a little bit, and this is going to proc off the Siphon, because right now this is only the corpse consuming ability that we have. So with this passive, you get 10 ultimate every 16 seconds, which is really good actually for building up ult for that Colossus ultimate. And again, you're going to get that 10 ult every time you use Mystic Siphon, because you need a corpse for that ability to work. And then Undead Confederate, mentioned this as well. This is amazing sustain, you guys, just for having one of those pets, I guess you can call them, active. You get 200 Magicka and Stamina. So we're getting that mostly from our Spirit Mender. That's another reason why you want your Mender active 100% of the time. You can see unbuffed, I have 1700 and 555. And then when that is up, I have 2,000 and 770. So some really good sustain from that passive. Make sure you grab that one. You want all your Destro staff passives, obviously, so you're doing more damage with those. Grab your Restoration staff passives as well as light armor. I'm using full light armor on this build, so these are going to be very good. You get extra spell crit, extra spell penetration, magic recovery, cost reduction. Excellent, excellent passives. If you're using heavy armor, like a heavy armor helmet or shoulder, you can pick up the first 3. You don't want to pick up any more than that, because the other ones need 5 pieces of heavy. Fighter's Guild, not so important, but Banish the Wicked is always a good passive for extra ult regen. If you have your Mage Guild maxed out, you will get an extra 2% max Magicka and Magicka Recovery on Inner Light, which is pretty good. Undaunted, obviously, if you have that, grab that for the extra stats. In support, we talked about this. If you're using Reviving Barrier, and I don't have this maxed out yet, you get 10% Magicka Recovery for the Magicka Aid passive. This is awesome. That's pretty much why I'm running Barrier, is just to get that 10%. Class skills, as always, make sure you pick those up. Alchemy, medicinal use as well. This makes your potions last 30% longer, so you need that for sure. Let's talk about CP briefly. Now, I do play this mostly in non-CP and Battlegrounds, so keep that in mind, but I do think it would work pretty well in both situations. So 34 into Warlord, 14 into Sprinter, 37 Tenacity, because you can do some juicy resto heavy attacks on your back bar and get some good sustain. You don't really need it on this build, but you may want to do it once or twice. Arcanist 75, 32 into Mooncalf. You got 40 into Shadow Ward, 37 Tumbling, 1 left over in Befoul. I don't even know why I put that there. 15 into Blessed, 40 into Elfborn, 64 Elemental Expert. Think of that extra flame damage and shock damage that we're doing. 24 into Spell Erosion. 35 into Staff Expert. This is interesting because we actually do a lot of damage with those light attacks on the Flame Staff. So that's also going to get buffed by the 20% for your light attacks here on Staff Expert. This is an excellent CP node to grab. You don't even need that many points to get a huge benefit from this. Then 66 Master Arms, obviously, because we're doing mostly direct damage. We've got the Skull. We've got the Blast Bones. Only 26 into Thaumaturge. I'm not really focused too much on the dots this time. You can flip the build more to a dot build, but I just felt like I didn't really know how it was going to feel in Dragonhold, so I have mostly single target damage. I think it's a safe way to go right now. 51 Ironclad, 56 Resistant, 43 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 48 into Light Armor Focus. This is just because BRETON passives and Light Armor passives are so spell resistant focused that I have so much more spell resistance than physical resistance. I like to pick this up on my Bretons just to balance it out a little bit more. So this kind of equals it out for me. 18 into Thick Skinned. Remember, we have the Purge. We also take less damage overall from dots, so you don't need very much, if any, there. And then just 11 into Quick Recovery. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the Infernal Magicka Necromancer PvP build. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button. It really does help out the channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I do create ESO build videos and guides, and I post those every week here on YouTube. To end the video, I'm just going to throw in some Battleground footage that I was playing earlier in the week so you can see how the build plays, how it feels, in case you want to check it out. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you around in the next video.
We've got them on the run!